Hello, Thought Roomies. As many of you know, I've been recording the latest episodes of The Thought Room from Costa Rica, where I've been for the last few months. But on December 22nd, I was flying back to North America for Christmas, and I had a connecting flight in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I took my phone off of airplane mode. And when I turned it on, there was a flood of messages and Instagram posts letting me know that one of my all-time heroes had passed away. And that is the incomparable Baba Ram Dass, who, for me, his teachings, his writings completely set me on my path of personal and spiritual unfoldment. So I felt such a sense of bittersweetness seeing that he had passed. He was 88 years old and lived a very full life. And in that regard, it feels on some level that his teachings or his work here on this earthly plane were complete. So, but of course, a loss for this world, because if you've ever seen him speak or watched even a video of him, his smile, his demeanor completely lights up the room. And his truths are so potent and anchored and profound. So after I got that news, I immediately whipped out my phone and I contacted my editor, Jacob, and I said, hey, listen, I think I want to change the order of the episodes. I think I want to release Jamie's episode this week. And Jamie is the director, Jamie Catto. He's the director of the new Ram Dass film, Becoming Nobody. And I had the opportunity to interview Jamie back in October in New York City when I connected with him after I had seen the film screening at the Rubin Museum. So before we get to the interview, I just want to talk about the topic of the holidays and Christmas for a minute. And I have gotten the most wonderful gift, and that is the gift of support from some of you all. I did a little Instagram story the other day about what it means when you support independent content, art that you believe in, music that you believe in, podcasts that you believe in, and how this is essentially you voting with your dollars. It's you putting your action in some regard behind the things that you want to see more of in the world, and how important that is to the people who are creating this content. So for me, what your support allows is for podcasts like The Thought Room to continue on and for me to keep this podcast ad-free. So I want to shout out to all of the supporters, namely, Robert B., who has funded a few of the last episodes out of his own pocket. I want to thank shout out to our newest Patreon supporters, Derek and James. Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. And I also want to say that I got another message from a listener saying, hey, your episodes are so rich with content and resources that I feel like I just want to pause all the time and take notes and write things down. Do you have these resources listed anywhere? And I want to say, why, yes, in fact, we do. And we actually take a great deal of time every week preparing detailed show notes for you guys with all the resources listed. If we ever talk about books or films or music or other teachers or coaches that we maybe touched on for you to dive into, we like to list it all out so that you can kind of take what's there and continue on your own path of what excites you and what interests you. So please know that that's always there for you. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you should just be able to expand the notes. And also, every single one of our episodes has its own little page on our website where you can very clearly see all of the show notes, all the resources listed. They're all hyperlinked, so if you click them, it usually goes directly to a page, be it on Amazon or maybe Spotify if it's a piece of music. And just to note that every purchase that's made through our show notes, through one of those hyperlinks, does in fact kick us back a couple of dollars of a donation. So if you were planning on buying something anyway that you heard on this show that you think you might be interested in, and you do it through one of those links, you are in your own small way supporting this podcast here. So if you want to find those show notes, you can definitely check out thoughtroompodcast.com for more. And before diving into my interview with Jamie, I just want to say he was so incredible to speak with. He's an incredibly eloquent, captivating speaker. He paints vivid pictures with his words and is somehow able to take some incredibly substantial universal truths and titrate them down to potent yet pleasantly accessible teachings. And he has worked with some incredible people. I mean, he himself is a highly successful musician and filmmaker. He is a TEDx speaker. He's been nominated for 2 Grammys and won numerous awards globally. He's collaborated and interviewed countless creative powerhouses, just to name a few: Bono, Alanis Morissette, Dido, Katie Lang, Brian Eno. He's worked with Dennis Hopper, John Cusack, Carrie Fisher, Susan Sarandon, and he's interviewed Kurt Vonnegut and Noam Chomsky. So without further ado, I want to dive into this episode with Jamie Catto. If you want to find more about Jamie and his amazing workshops and what he's offering, you can find more of him at jamiecatto.com. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy this episode. Here's Jamie Catto. Jamie Catto, welcome to the Thought Room.
Thank you very much. What a pleasure to be here.
So we're in New York right now, and last night I saw your new film, Becoming Nobody, and it is a film primarily featuring Ram Dass's life, correct?
More his take, his teachings, his funniest things that he expresses and shares. His life, biography-wise, is barely in it at all.
So I know there's a story here because I saw a little bit of it in the film, but can you talk about how did you become first fascinated with Ram Dass's teachings in general? You met him when you were quite young, is that correct?
Yeah, and I heard his tapes before that in my early 20s, and just, you know, I just love when I discover something that I think is gold. You know, it's the absolute cream of that genre, of that thing. It could be the best avocado toast, or it could be the best way that they teach a child this skill, or it could be the best, you know, someone's come up with like, oh, Yes.
Mm.
And he's just full of that. You know, he's just like, when you watch it, you just marvel when he speaks. He's got such insanely funny, sweet, penetrative articulation. You know, he has the power of explanation so beautifully, so humanely, so unpretentiously, so ungrandiosely, just like you or me, crazy in the mess, and still totally like nailing it. And it's just such good medicine. I just wanted to create a vessel where that medicine could pour out of speakers and screens as much as possible in the world.
Mm. One thing that really fascinated me to learn about this film was, well, first and foremost, you're a musician. I mean, you're a film director, but you're a musician. And that was something that I started to get more of a picture of when I was reading up before this interview. But you actually created this film and your other films as a piece of music first. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's not strictly, hang on. Excuse me. It's not strictly like that all the time. Sometimes you find an image and you're like, oh, that has to go in. But generally, to make it work as a piece of content that starts somewhere and ends somewhere, it's like a piece of music in that there's an arc of energy, an arc where you lift it and then there's space, and then it lifts. You know, you take somebody on a journey of their heart, which isn't just bang, 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 like advertising. Neither is it totally sort of stillness, and, you know, it's got its own flavor. And the music is, we treat Ram Dass's voice when he's talking as the lead vocal, so the music is constantly there to support the emotion or the feeling, just like it does in any old film that you watch. It's amazing if you watch some of your favorite movies with the sound off or with the music off. It's just like it reduces its power by like 3/4. So music is like such a beautiful way to enrich and hold the part of the emotion that's receiving these beautiful thoughts and these beautiful takes. And yeah, and then at the end we illustrate it.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. So, I mean, music. Let's start there with your journey with music and your first film. If you want to talk about that a little bit, I was watching your TEDx, and you talk about your friend and the kind of sound desk or soundboard that you created, and you ended up traveling the world. And if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we became the luckiest artists ever in the universe, which was after I was in this group called Faithless, which was very successful in Europe. We had the chance on this side project, me and my friend Duncan, we had got together because we loved certain albums, and particularly the Passion album by Peter Gabriel, which is the music for The Last Temptation of Christ, pivotal for my musical journey. And another more obscure one called My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, which was Brian Eno and David Byrne. After they finished the Talking Heads album Remain in Light, they kind of hung about the studio and used some of the old bits and made this mental album, really groundbreaking, groovy, with mad preachers from the radio in Kentucky coming out, you know, just mental album. And we both felt, wow, there's so many amazing, incredible singers and players in the world that people would have then called world music. African singers like Baba Mal, incredible flute players like Hari Prasad Chaurasia in India, or drummers like Trilok Gurtu, these amazing master musicians who, when you listen to them, your heart just like melts. But all of their actual CDs, because they come from quite poor countries, have never had really good music production. So you can never really listen to their albums and really get it. And we were like, wow, wouldn't it be amazing to make this incredible landscape of sound, which is like part Pink Floyd, part hip-hop, part just really groovy, broad, rich music production with all these master musicians and singers, and go to their countries and put the headphones on them. They can hear our track, and then they sing and play over the track. And then we go to the next country, and the master drummers of Ghana can hear what the guy in India sang or played, and they play with it, even though they'll never meet, over our track. And these overdubs of layers and layers and layers, and a very, often two of them like complement each other incredibly, but in a way that's never ever been done before, because that Indian singer has never been to Africa, and the other way around. So then when we got a record deal for that quite quickly with this wonderful man Chris Blackwell, who's the guy that signed Bob Marley and U2, he had a company called Island Records. He then had a new thing, which was a new thing called DVD was starting. This is in the late 90s. So he said, we need a film as well. You can't just make an album. And so we went away, and funnily enough, David Byrne had written me a letter recently when I wanted him to join in on a worldy kind of project. He said, it's not that interesting filming people going places, plugging in instruments. You might want to rethink. So with that in mind, we said to the label, we don't just want to film ourselves going and making this music. We want to talk to all the most exciting, inspirational people we've ever read or met. People like Ram Dass, people like Kurt Vonnegut, people like Tom Robbins, American master authors, people in prison in Mexico, the woman who wrote, like Laura Esquivel, who wrote Like Water for Chocolate, like all these wonderful authors and thinkers, and people in the street, petrol pump attendants, people with a twinkle in their eye, whoever. And we would make each one of the music tracks its own film and have its own theme. So one is God, one is sex, one is death, one is shadow, and one is pain, one is time. And all those subjects, whether you're in a mud hut in the Congo or in a penthouse in Los Angeles, you can have a conversation about that with anybody. So we filmed everybody, priests, imams, Buddhists, whatever, monks, just everybody, kids, talking about these subjects, and then cut together the most heartening and real, authentic things they all said that were the most moving. And so it was so diverse on the surface, but underneath this incredible golden thread of unity that runs through the whole thing. And so that we were the luckiest artists in the world, because we could basically go anywhere in the planet. It was a 6-month shoot with no days off. We went all the way around, a lap around the world, 50 global locations, every continent covered pretty well, and got to just work with anyone doing anything we wanted, and then edit it into anything we want at the end. So it was just like as much transmission of inspiration and upliftedness as we could pack into, in a beautiful arc that went into your heart. A bit like the Ram Dass film, although that's just through one guy's. This was like that times all the most inspiring things we could ever find.
How did you first come up with that idea? And you're like, yeah, we're going to do this.
Because we wanted to come up with something that wasn't just music if we were making a film. So what's the next inspiring thing? Let's showcase all these amazing people that's blown us away. That most people, not everyone knows Kurt Vonnegut. He's an old guy. He's dead now, like if you've read Slaughterhouse-Five maybe, but most people, don't realize what an amazing twinkly master. So to catch him while he was still alive and have him talk about how he believes music is proof of the existence of God, even though he's actually an atheist. He's like a really clear atheist.
That's
his whole life. And his last thing he says, which was like our interview with him was maybe the last filmed interview or one of them. And he said, music is for me proof of the existence of God, which is like such a turnaround.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that sentiment. Obviously, I feel like sound is so powerful, and that's why I was so fascinated with the idea that your films are sound centric. Like that as a concept is really unique. Oh yeah, we're gonna create this film, which is visual in medium, and make it sound centric, because I keep thinking about vibration, and it's all vibration. It's all the word.
And music is an amazing vessel to carry, a bit like sometimes you have like a base oil for your aromatherapy or for your stuff like, you have a base oil within which you put in the healing medicine of lavender or whatever else you're putting in. And so music is like the base oil that can carry all different things deeper into people, and it is like the perfect way to clothe feelings without having to use words.
Yeah, it's a great conduit. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about your spiritual journey, if you will? I loved what you said at the Q&A when you were talking about your films being for regular people and not for... You said something really funny. It was about crystals. I can't remember exactly what you said.
I said a lot of this kind of so-called spiritual data, which is really just life skills, really important things to wake you up to the joy and possibility of living a peaceful, joyful life, all that stuff. But it's normally got the trappings, the costumes of such off-putting bad taste. And I said dolphins, rainbows, and irresponsibly sourced crystals.
Yes, that's what it was. Irresponsibly sourced crystals, yes. Yeah.
So, there's so much of that world, which is to anyone with any taste really off-putting. They miss all the incredible data that could be behind it, because it's got a stupid costume that no one wants anything to do with. The same with religion. Within religion, not within the text, Jesus or Buddha or whatever, of course, incredible, important, but it's been ruined with so much materialism and so much, within Christianity, so much murder and rape and just total abuse of Jesus' name for profit, like ripping everyone off on their deathbeds forever. it bears little there are some people lower down the echelons of Christianity, of course, doing some beautiful things, some wonderful Christians out there, but the actual organization itself, to me, worse than the Nazis even, as far as the absolute violence and insanity century after century. Even recently saying to Africa not to use condoms, it's like a purely evil act. There's nothing, bizarre. So I can't remember why I went off on the Christian thing. But yeah,
your spiritual journey.
There is so much about religion and about new agey stuff which is blocking this vital information from everyday people. And so I always, as an artist, I'm trying to get this information out there in an inspiring, non-cringy, squirmy way.
So yourself, again, going back to that initial event of meeting Ram Dass, I think I heard you say somewhere that it was the first time you really took yourself to anything like that. You had been to some spiritual events or things like this before with other people, but something within you was resonating with his message and it drew you there. Was that really the beginning of what you would call your spiritual journey, or had you been on a path before that?
Oh, I mean, I felt I was on a spiritual journey as a young child. I just couldn't articulate it, and I would get into trouble for it, or particularly just not being able to not say what was going on. I lived in a house where certain things weren't said, and that was really claustrophobic. So I didn't really have the ability to let everyone sit here and go, wait, hello everyone, why are we not saying this? I was always the one saying it, and I remember like a couple of times as a child trying out magic and it working and frightening myself.
Tell me more about that. I like this story.
No, it's not I think to be proud of. I remember age 7, standing in the street, seeing a motorbike going past and thinking to myself, I wonder if I can make him fall off with my mind. And then 5 seconds later, he's just span off the bike into the curb. Wasn't hurt, but I frightened myself. Probably there could have easily been no connection whatsoever. It was just a coincidence. But as a 7-year-old, it felt like, and there was another time when I stopped a clock. I just stopped a second hand going around the clock, just curiously to see if I could. I wasn't like trying to do it. And that frightened. And both those times I felt quite an uncomfortable amount of adrenaline in my body, and it scared me. And I used to have these kind of things, sort of meltdowns. I don't know what they were, but I'm sure, I don't know, if I'd been born, it's a bit grandiose to say this, but if I'd been born in rural Brazil, and I was having those kind of meltdowns, I might have been taken off with the medicine man and learn how to talk to the trees. I just think I had too much sensitivity for the environment that I was in. So that was really the beginning of the spiritual path, was how that suffering kind of really had to sent me into myself, the Jamie that I had to be to get through some of those nights where I was freaking out or whatever. I think really was the beginning, and most of everything I've learnt, which is now distilled into creative workshops and shadow workshops and living your dream kind of workshops, it really was born of being forced to evolve unwillingly, being dragged backwards, kicking and screaming through every step of evolution. I very rarely did any spiritual work because, wouldn't it be good to go and stretch myself in this spiritual way? Let's all do Vipassana for 10 days. Most of the things I've gone and done, I did because I kind of almost felt I had no choice. I had to do something. I was in such a pickle.
You talk about shadow work, and I can sense that there's a strong connection or a passion there for you. Do you want to talk about how that started? And for people who are listening to this who don't even know what the term shadow work is.
I'd love to just say what shadow is, because when people think about doing shadow work, first of all, work, schmirk. But when people do stuff with shadows, what people think they're dealing with, or when they come, often the shadow is like, my shadow, my dark side, my greediness, my need, my rage, that's my shadow. It's not your shadow at all. Those things do end up in the shadow. What the shadow is as we grow up as children, we are shown that parts of our natural spectrum of who we are, some of our natural parts of us are more welcome than others, depending on the rules of the culture and the house you grew up in. So as well as, yes, of course, everyone had anger outlawed in their childhood. You were never allowed to express anger pretty much anyway. So that did go into the shadow. It's part of you, your anger, but not expressed in the world. It's hidden away. It's in the shadow. So the shadow is what's hidden away in the shadows, not dark. Shadow just means hidden away. You keep it, in the shadows where no one can see it. That's what shadow work is. So for many, many people, your natural flamboyant entertainer, which is a natural part of everybody, to tell a joke, enjoy, whatever, nearly everyone had that shut down. Too loud, stop showing off in front of your friends, really cruel treatment if you felt you were hogging the limelight or whatever. You learnt pretty young that was shameful. So everyone has shut down, and when they have to give a best man speech or a best woman speech at some wedding, they panic and they have to plan it and read it off a piece of paper, when truly they could just stand up and connect to their heart and just say to everybody, I love Sharon and Dennis, and just say, remember anecdotes, if we weren't so hung up about that because of the shame of childhood. So your natural flamboyant entertainer for most people goes into the shadow, and you start being judgmental of other people who are free in that area. And so everyone has in their shadow all kinds of wonderful treasure, as well as their greed, their anger, the things society has no place for. And we have made it so illegal to be seen in those places. We would just die. We're so obsessed with how people see us that we don't even look over there anymore. We kind of look the other way, and it's built up into this huge phantom, all these parts of ourselves. And it actually is so low-hanging fruit, this stuff. It's so not edgy and it's so hilarious that when you just take it, even though we've made this map of ourselves, and around the edge of the edge we edited ourselves down to, be bad girls. Pretty girls don't do that. Okay, I'll be a pretty girl. So any sort of messy or ugliness publicly you try and avoid. Always make sure I've got a hairbrush, whatever it is. Massive trajectories of our life have always got to look pretty, never look vulnerable, never, for a man, never look weak, never fail. Never cry publicly. A lot of people don't have, girls can cry a bit more than boys, but most girls still, in a workshop, if someone starts crying, they'll often go, sorry, like they've really lost their permission. Unconsciously out comes the sorry. Especially men don't even get to that stage unless they're really, really, being pushed. And they're never pushed in my workshops. There's no pushing whatsoever. So all of that uncried tears, all of that unscreamed rage, all of those parts of ourselves that have been told, you're not for public consumption. Pretty girls aren't like that. Strong boys aren't like that. Greedy girls hog the limelight. You should be more humble. Spiritual boys don't. Whatever it is that you've decided you are, that you're presenting to the world, all of those rest of those parts, they're suppressed. You can't amputate them. And so they start turning into illness. Or they start turning into weird sabotagey behavior in your life that leaps out. Like all the things you're trying to suppress the most, they're like a beach ball. The more you push it down under the water, the more it wants to fly up. So a lot of people say, beware the anger of the quiet man. And so all these parts of ourselves, they're coming home whether you like it or not, because your body is hardwired for wholeness. It's constantly mending itself the best way it can, including all the bits of yourself you've tried to edit off. It wants them back. So we have to find healthy ways for these parts of us to play. Not suddenly bring back the rage and just start shouting at everyone at work. No, but maybe you write a short story with a really dark... Some of the best characters of literature have been born of people's like rage and disgustingness and things they can't include in course in their everyday life, or punk rock songs, or poetry, or some beautiful, energetic way you dance the 5 rhythms next week, or you do so. You find a way for those parts of us to play, and then they don't hang up and just, be sabotaging in your life. And in fact, you inherit so much treasure and power by doing this. And as I can't stress enough, as a lazy person, it's such low-hanging fruit. You don't have to do deep scuba and huge catharsis and exposure to do any of this. You literally have a conversation where we very gently snorkel around the edge. You piss yourself laughing, and just parts of yourself just come home. There's like tears of relief. You can't believe you just kind of had that cordoned off, compartmentalized for so long. It's like, oh, hello, oh, come back. You're just unaware of it, but it's to the side, and you just take a little look towards it, and all those dragons around the edge of your map, there be dragons, don't go here. You turn towards them, you realize they're just like children's chalk drawings of dragons. Little, just a, and they're gone. And reveal treasure. They don't just neutralize pain. They bring a bit of treasure on top. It was like, oh my God, I love that. Remember what you loved. That's my short answer.
That's a great answer. You use the word treasure, and I love that word. And I think I heard you say somewhere that there's treasure in the pain. And that reminds me very much of Ram Dass and that one moment in your film when he says, oh, my pain was gorgeous this morning.
Yeah, sometimes my pains are so gorgeous.
Yeah, sometimes
beautiful.
My pain is so gorgeous. And he said before, I love my pain. I love my wheelchair, to love it all.
Yeah.
And
I've got a little technique that if your listeners this way, anyone might hear this, so you might as well chuck it out there. So this is actually a direct thing you can do that really, really works for pain or thoughts or feelings that you just think you don't want. So sometimes I'm driving along in the car and I might be hit by just like a wave of hopelessness and depression. That's part of the weather system. It sometimes passes through all of us at different times, or sometimes you wake up in the morning with a heavy feeling in your chest, even before, it's like, oh, something's wrong. And so the mind will start scanning for what could be wrong and what can I solve to make this feeling go away. Because all the mind wants to do is help you not feel uncomfortable feelings, because we've really programmed it. I must never be uncomfortable. But if you take that away and say, actually, I'm a human who's quite interested in feeling some, not all, some of my low-level uncomfortable feelings. I can be curious about those, because there will be in life pain and pleasure. It doesn't have to be suffering, but there will definitely be some pain and some discomfort. So we get curious about that. So imagine I'm driving along and I get hit by just what feels like some huge wave of grief or hopelessness or whatever. Usually my mind, as I said, would start scanning my life for what is grievous and hopeless at the moment that I can solve and make this feeling go away. That's just what our normal thing is to do. But if instead of doing that, you stop, don't even call it grief. You feel a big wave of feeling that you used to call grief and hopelessness. And what we say is we make up a word that doesn't mean anything. We call it that. So like a word like schlumpf. So you go, oh, I'm feeling schlumpf. And because you haven't used that word before, there's no associated grief or funerals or people's illnesses or other people's griefs and sobbing attached to schlumpf. It's just schlumpf, and nor is there hopelessness. So that whole kind of ancestry of it is gone. It's just this moment's sensation, nothing else, not loaded with any other concepts, just this feeling, and it's called schlumpf. What does schlumpf feel like? So immediately now it doesn't hurt as much. It may not be pleasant still, but it's not like pulling me down. It's like I'm curious about, it's kind of in my solar plexus. It's a pressure on my throat. Oh, schlumpf, hello. What do you feel like? And you be kind of welcoming and curious about it. It really turns into quite an interesting sensation. And then if you want to go even further, you say, okay, well, I'm not going to call it schlumpf. What if I call it love? What if it's like one of the 10,000 names of the goddess, and they're not all fluffy, not all aspects of love are fluffy. Some of them are raw, some of them are tender, but it's still love. Okay, what if I really go deep into feeling this feeling in my chest, and we just say it's love, and say, hi, some tender love, hello, old friend. And then suddenly you're having a totally different experience on what could have derailed the day and gone off on a depression, whatever, or gone to the Cinnabon booth, or what could have gone wrong. It could... suddenly turns into a piece of treasure experience where a little part of yourself that has a legitimate need underneath. I ask these 5, what I call the 5 unpretentiously named golden keys of alchemy, because I like inventing my own Taoist ancient mythology for the purists and the Sanskrit people. So these 5 unpretentiously named golden keys of alchemy, you ask these 5 questions whenever it's not what you want going on. You say, first, if I had set up this experience as a training simulation and then forgotten about it, what was I trying to show myself? That's number 1 I ask. Second one I ask is, how is this a reminder for me to self-care in a way that I've forgotten to or neglected to? How am I not self-caring here? Is it a boundary I'm not setting? Is it I'm not drinking enough water? Am I not stopping long enough and resting? There's some lack of self-care going on here. What might that be? The third thing is could this be an invitation for me to show up more, be more honest, visible, authentic in some way, whatever's going on? The fourth one is, does this hurt more because of my painful past? And the fifth thing is, through all of this, what are the gifts I can share with others? And if you ask those 5 questions to any difficult experience in your life, it will start pouring treasure towards you.
Wow. I love this kind of, I think about the word non-attachment. This is a big buzzword, and what I like better is kind of curiosity, because non-attachment has such this connotation with it, and people who aren't really familiar with it go, oh, that sounds unhealthy. Like being detached from yourself, that sounds unhealthy. But I like this idea of being curious in a way that you're seeing it happen, but not, engaging by being hooked in the feeling. And you talked about being, I think it was like a wine taster of your emotions. I love that metaphor. Can you talk about that?
When you're a wine taster, first of all, that means you're turning towards something and being curious about it rather than trying to push it away. And 99% of people's edgy feelings in a day, they will run straight to Facebook or the fridge or something to make it go away. And what we do is we turn towards it and we go, oh, hello, like just curiously. And you start actually, because you're being a willing participant now, you're turning towards it. It doesn't need to keep shouting at volume 11 to get your attention. So the moment you turn towards it, it quietens down and it starts revealing itself and gives you the information or the data or the thing that it wants to give you, either by asking it questions, but also by, especially if it's somewhere that hurts in the body, you can send a little radar through it and you start looking at it like a 3D lump. You imagine that your smiling breath is a kind of a radar passing through wherever in the body it hurts. So if you've got some pain in your throat or chest, you're just localizing the radar as you breathe in and out, smiling gently. The radar goes through, and the smiling breath is almost like blowing on embers, and it's showing up a 3D shape of that feeling in your body wherever it is as you're smiling and breathing. So you're looking at it now. You're not in it, being collapsed by it, a victim to it. You're on the outside of it, looking at it, and you go, what color is it? As I just look at it, if it had a color, what color would it be? You just keep breathing and smiling through it. Actually, it starts usually to dissolve or move around a bit, but you say, where is it? How big is it? What 3D shape is it? What texture is it? Is it like jelly, or is it like sand? Is it like glass? Is it like smoke? Is it moving, or is it still? We just keep letting the radar go, now where is it? And you do that a few times, you're really becoming a willing participant in the full acceptance and feeling of whatever's going on. It starts communicating to you through the questions I was just asking before, or it just recalibrates somewhere beautifully in the body, or it might turn into a little 5 minutes of have some gentle tears, whatever. But us being a willing participant in our uncomfortable feelings gives the body's genius space and time and assistance to do the best with it can, which is better than you and I could think. Certainly better than Facebook or the fridge or the Cinnabon booth.
I don't know. Cinnabon's pretty good.
I've never had one.
Me either. I love this. Fascinating. There's so much material out there now about the mind-body connection, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately too. It feels like in this culture, mind is king, and that's where we're putting all our emphasis. But the body has such innate, ancient wisdom. Like I think even about in my work and stuff, childbirth, and how women's bodies have just known what to do since the beginning of time. And of course, now we have women giving birth in hospitals and all of these injections and things to help. But the body wisdom is so ancient. But what would you say to people who think this is just a bunch of fluff? I mean, that our bodies can't talk to us and that there isn't emotion stored there or anything of that nature?
I would say just try it for 4 weeks. Just if you feel cynical about it, absolutely fair enough. A lot of very, very unbelievable people have gone on about this stuff who just do not seem credible. So you, first of all, correct. I feel the same, which is why I make my work the way that I do. But if you're going to be cynical about it, that's fine. But I would just say, try it for 4 weeks, just fully, and then go back to the other 5,000 weeks of your life not doing it. But if you be cynical, include your own cynicism in the cynical thing. Be cynical about your own cynicism. If you include your own cynicism in your cynical approach, then I'm down with you. But if you're cynical about everything except your cynicism, then that I'm not interested.
That's fair. That's very fair.
And one way you can express that, being cynical about your own cynical position, is try it for a few weeks. Just imagine that it's true. Totally suspend all disbelief and imagine that all the difficult things that happen, or all the people that come across your path and annoy you, were curriculum sent by some imaginary central casting agency that is trying to sort of, illuminate you, unstick you, show you yourself by your reactivity, show you your mind. Spend some time listening to your thoughts, seeing what the content of those thoughts are that you keep returning to. Well, what's the legitimate need underneath that? You may be like, I can't stop thinking about something. I make a little game of myself again in the car. It's like, we've got a 1.5 hour drive. Okay, we've now thought about this 7 times. Let's see how many times my mind returns this thing. But so you play that game, so you tie a bell to the ankle. But deeper than that, you ask that voice or that thought, what's the legitimate need underneath? Because sometimes, because it's presenting itself in an antisocial way or a painful way, we want to get rid of it. We never find out what the bloody thing underneath was that was the point, because it's not. And it's just like we sometimes parent our children really badly, like because they're expressing themselves in a shitty way, you can sometimes like penalize them by not giving them the need underneath that they actually do legitimately need, because they weren't expressing it nicely. So it's quite dangerous for kids that way, because they end up not getting their legitimate needs met because they're being punished for not, unless you speak nicely, I'm not going to give you your emotional needs. And it's like sometimes kids don't have the capacity that day to speak nicely. They still need their emotional needs met. So we sometimes withhold, and we do it to ourselves. We withhold from ourselves when we think we haven't been doing it nicely, or we remove the joy of a certain thing when we're being judgmental about ourselves. So,
or people we love as well.
Yeah.
It's like, when we see someone seeking attention, or someone being what we might label needy, which is our perception of their experience. We go, well, I'm not going to give into that because they're being needy. So we then separate ourselves by taking that position of teaching them a lesson, and we're othering and we're putting ourselves up here. Yeah.
And ourselves. So it's really good to sort of like help someone out if they're being indirect. Help them be direct. Do you need some support? Sounds like you need some support, but you let them make it consensual with you before being tricked into just following their suffering lead into knee-jerk martyrdom.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this idea of separation and othering, and you said somewhere something about what unifies us is this, that we're all mental or something like that. I enjoyed that.
We're all totally crazy and hiding it, and no one thinks anyone else knows how crazy they are. But the truth is, if the people in your life, or dear listener, the person in your life, people in your life could hear your inner dialogue on a daily basis, can you imagine? You just, all credibility gone, over, for everyone. And to all acknowledge that fact together, that we're all absolutely batshit crazy and doing an incredible job of hiding it from each other. It's the deepest intimacy you start a workshop with. Everyone's laughing about that. We're halfway there.
Yeah. You talked about masks in the film. And do you want to talk about that moment? I love that when you and Ram Dass discuss masks.
Well, he talks about the way we are with each other in culture is very masked. So I wear the mask of a good worker, who you are at work, who you are in front of your mother, who you are in front of your boyfriend's parents, who you are in front of your kids, who you are in front of your best friends. Not all of it's masked, some of it's less masked than others, but we have different roles we play when we're kind of this version of ourselves for them. And there are social roles, and often people are so used to living that way with everyone, they actually think that's who they are. Those masks have been on so long, they don't ever not do it, so they assume that's their face. But when they get to a place in themselves where there's an authenticity behind, it doesn't mean that you rip off all the masks and be, because like certain parental figures, or they don't want, you can't expect them to have the capacity to hear you on every level that you want to be heard, and we've got to let our parents off the hook for that. They don't have the capacity or the education or the time of culture that they grew up in to necessarily really grasp all the things you think are natural. So it's very important to let everybody off the hook, including oneself. We're all acting, at full capacity, despite we might have conned everyone that we could do better than this. But actually, when the chips are down, often we fail, fall flat on our faces, say the wrong thing, upset somebody, even do something we really, really, really regret.
Right.
But it still comes from a legitimate need that needs to be met.
Yeah, because the irony is what we're seeking is approval and love and affection. And that's why we're putting on these masks, because we think if we present appropriately, then we won't be rejected. And you talk about this as well. You said, well, the irony is that
we're being rejected by the people we don't want to hang out with, who need us to wear a mask.
Right.
Very gently take them all off, see who stays. Those are your people and their friends. And just start getting more into your chosen family than often your blood family. Doesn't mean you get rid of your blood family, but they don't have to be so central to your life if they don't uphold you.
Wow. Yeah, intimacy is really huge. And personally in my life, I've been diving into a lot as far as conscious relationships, nonviolent communication. And I'm sure you do this in your work with coaching and workshops as well. Can you speak at all to what you've learned about intimacy and sexuality and connection?
I run a workshop called What About Us, and one called What About Intimacy. And I'm running a workshop in 2 weeks' time with my friend Vilrike in Amsterdam, doing an Amsterdam workshop called How to Have the Best Sex Ever, which is funny.
Go on. I'm sure people are perked up now.
Yeah. Well, it's really just about listening. It's turning on the yin curiosity. The greatest lovemaking happens in the world when you are so listening to the other person, so deeply tuned into them, to exactly every smell, every sight, every curve, everything their body is yearning for. Is, if you're being sensitive, you can feel on the inside of your body if you're really in your yin sensitiveness. And so if you're so tuned into that person to be devotional to everything that they're giving off, and feeling that generosity around them, you're going to have the most amazing lovemaking ever. And so we go into like what that yin really means, and feel each other deeply. It doesn't have to be erotic, you know. And the other thing is a big part of healing the male and female wound on the planet, because you as a woman, understandably, you know, I don't know any woman who hasn't had some form of low, medium, high level sexual abuse in her life, even if it was just a teenage boyfriend pushing your head down because they wanted a blowjob. Even that is having your head pushed down. Doesn't have, you know, even a bit is weird and borderline, you know, abusive behavior. Not borderline. So it's all naive and everyone's doing their best, but every woman has had, or she's had. There's this great amazing thing that they asked groups of men and women to prove a point. They said, okay, men, we'd like you to all say, what are the precautions you take on a daily basis to make sure you don't get sexually assaulted? And the men all look at each other like, well, I don't know. I don't get drunk. I don't, you know, whatever. They couldn't come up with anything really. Then they said to all the women, okay, can you tell us, just volunteer, hands up, what do you do on a daily basis to avoid being sexually assaulted? Suddenly everyone has something that they do. I don't drink after, you know, I don't leave my drink at the bar if I go to the toilet. I always carry keys. I make sure I park near the thing. I don't wear clothes if I'm going to be in a certain area that are particularly too racy. I don't do, and men don't realize that just it's been normalized that women have to sort of protect themselves against a certain factor of a certain kind of man. And there's been so much rape and abuse, and not even in the violence side of it, but also in the violence of not letting women speak, not letting them have an equal voice. There's so much forgiving and confessing that needs to happen before we can just gaily lead the new age men back to the women. So I'm starting a thing called Adam and Eve, which is to heal the male and female wound. It's not going to be too heteronormal, but at the moment, you know, it is a male-female wound that we're going for at the moment, and it will upset some things, but I've got to get this core of it right. And we do this thing in the workshop where we sit 10 men opposite 10 women. And before we do that, the men have all gone off, and they have to come back with 3 things they want the women to know that they want from men. And the women all go off and they come back with 3 things they want the men to know that the women want. And then we all sit opposite each other, and just sitting opposite each other, having gone off and come up with those 3 things, is juicy before anyone's said anything. And then let's say we start with the women. They pick their first thing and they say to the men, one of them stands up or whatever, reads from the piece of paper, something like, we want you to know that we want more touch that doesn't necessarily have to lead to sex. And then we let it hang for a moment, and then the women, all the different women, call upon different men to say, what did you hear? It's an NVC thing. What did you hear when you're being asked? Can you say back what you just think you got asked? And in that conversation, does anyone need to ask for clarity? Yeah, did you mean, when you say touch, do you know, sensual touch, or do you just mean, you know, like, they start having this conversation, and so much healing happens just by that conversation. And then we swap sides. No one says yes or no. They just when all the women are convinced all the men have got what they're being asked, that's the end of that bit, and we swap sides. And then the men, someone from the men stands up and they say to the women, we want you to know, we want your lovingly and respectfully expressed challenge as a teammate when you see us being less than our potential. And that hangs, and many of the women start weeping at that point because they can't believe the men really want this, because it's been so pushed away through complaint and criticism that the baby's gone with the bathwater. So that, just to hear, is huge. And then the conversation happens. The men call upon the women. They say, what did you hear when we asked you for that? And once they can get, you know, there's like, they'll say, well, what I hear is you don't want to be complained to. You know, so that the subtext of what that's asking, this conversation starts happening. And yes, but we do want, as a teammate, I just don't want you loving me to hang on whether I do it how you want. But we, you know, so this wonderful conversation. And so they go back and forth with different things, and the things that the healing, that transformation I've seen happen in the room during this game is so powerful. And you do that game, you will have the best sex ever.
Wow. I love that. I love this project. This is obviously the first time I'm hearing about this, but this is something I'm super passionate about, is bringing these feminine and masculine energies of the planet back into balance. And I love that you're doing it through creation, because I often talk about this. If you're going to be an advocate for something, to me, that means creating more of what you want to see versus tearing down what you don't want.
Yeah, build the new. Don't complain about the old. Build the new. And Mother Teresa is famous for saying, as I'm sure you know, she wouldn't go on the march for hate, against hate, but she said, "I'll come on a march for peace."
Yeah.
Build the new. We have so much possibility. I once interviewed Noam Chomsky, who's a great thinker, in one of my films, and he says all of our school days, they are engineering you to think there's nothing you can do. Because in these cultures you can do a lot, and you can't control people by force like you can in some countries. So they have to control your minds and your attitudes, and they just spend school making you into a good worker bee, obeying the rules and the lineage and getting this much and doing well and getting a tick. And all the free thinkers are weeded out. They just let fall by the wayside. They just don't care. They only want the ones that toe the company line. And part of that company line is to be, don't make any trouble, carry on, trust the big machine, and there's nothing really that you can do. You're a little thing in a big thing. There's nothing much you can do. But the truth is, you can do a lot. You can reach a lot of people. And even if you did a project and it just built one African school for the girls of a village because they were in a Muslim thing and couldn't learn with the boys, or if there was a thing, if you do one little thing, the sum total of all our little things is a lot. You only need to see the One Giant Leap movie. Yes, that little vocal by Alanis Morissette on its own is nice, but it's not, the whole thing. That beautiful phrase that Eckhart Tolle says about the pain body, it's great, it's not the whole, but you put all of these things together and you go, fucking hell, that's some serious transmission that lasts forever.
That is so powerful. That I think takes the pressure off, because we're all trying to be so
That's America.
important.
You've been raised to have the aspiration of being a millionaire. That's what your school life is about. To keep everyone having the aspiration of being a millionaire and buying the kind of gadgets and phones and cars and clothes that make it look like you're there or on the way there. And that's everything. The status of looking like you're on the way there or they're already there, and having the aspiration to be there. And it's a totally tiny aim. It's a silly waste of... Anyone who's got there will tell you it didn't give it to them. For Jim Carrey, Elton John, everyone says, I wish you could be the famous and rich as me, so you can realize it doesn't change anything. You're still you with your neurosis and your problems and your insecurities and your if-onlys. What really, really makes those things life rich is human connection and being your true self with people as much as possible. Really having, because when you've been authentic with someone, they feel more permission to be authentic with you, and that intimacy widens hugely. So not being so hooked into what do people think and am I a millionaire and have I done well in everyone else's eyes and all this stuff. It's a very low aim, and it keeps everybody distracted like a kind of drug in the media of the shopping and the this and the that, when really the human connection, just if we spent as much time actually like reaching out for human connection, checking on people, seeing if they're okay, talking about our own mess and our own vulnerability more freely so that other people can laugh about what a lunatic they are. So lovely laughing with someone about being a basket case. It's a really underrated joy of the human potential to laugh with people about being a total loon. And people even criticize you, jump on the criticism. They say, oh, that was a stupid thing to say. You go, oh man, you think that was stupid? You should have heard what I said yesterday. That was stupid. And you tell them, just be the fool, be it all. And it's such a relief. And all the intimacy and deeper connection we crave is in that area.
This theme of humor and lightness, I think personally, this feels like a message for me right now, because I tend to get insanely serious about things and achieving and wanting things the perfect way. And that was one thing that I really was thinking about on the way home on the subway after watching your film, which was, how can I invite play? How can I invite humor into mischief?
That's the word I think you should focus on.
Okay, and inviting mischief into my life, and even applying that to the lens of noticing my thoughts, like, oh, interesting, cheeky, yeah. I caught you doing that again. That's you fun. Almost got me.
Right, exactly. That's a super relationship to have with the divine. The you're not going to get me that easily relationship. When you're playing, there's going to be adversity. You can treat it like, oh, why is this happening to me? As if our lives should always be adversity free. Or you can treat it like your spiritual Aikido partner who is playing little tricks on you, and if you do it with good humor, they become more funny and less like shameful that you failed again and you're not a good yogi.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Like sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm just like, oh wow, you look pretty fucking tired right now, and then I'll be like, oh my gosh, no, you look great. Look at you. Look at this body that you're in. Look at all the limbs that you can move. Like that was a almost pulled a fast one on me.
And you can also then in a silly voice go, girl, you is ugly.
Oh,
you can let that happen as well.
Right.
You can have it. Don't even suppress.
Is that neuro-linguistic programming?
No. I'm just saying, let the shitty voice play. It's not like, no, it's a shitty voice. We can only say nice voices. When a shitty voice comes up and says you're ugly, let it come out. Go be the pantomime villa of ugliness before you walk out the door. Like, it's not just because it's not nice. It needs to be got rid of. All of it needs to have a safe place to play. So your, body hate or whatever, like you kind of just like mess with it and play with it and make it theatre and be an ogre, be a troll, be an ogre, be a troll, be a monster. Don't be anything that isn't nice about me is going to be sanitized. Just find the place to do it that's the most fun. The dance floor is a great place to be ridiculous. You're not on show.
Do you dance?
I dance more in my room than I've got 3 daughters.
You do. Yeah.
But let those parts, be careful about quickly sanitizing the negative one. Just channel it in something sillier.
Wow, that's great. I'm thinking about contrast actually right now, and some of the teachings of Abraham Hicks. This idea that it's not all supposed to be happy. We're not supposed to be happy all the time. And it's the contrast that really brings the beauty in life.
Can you savor the sadness? The question is, when you have a sad day, you can call it schlumpf if you need to get somewhere. But also, just when you're feeling those tender feelings, can you go and write a beautiful poem sitting under a tree? Or can you just moisturize yourself half the speed you usually do? Or can you just call someone else and see if they're feeling melancholy too, and remind them of, wasn't it fun when Dad, call your sister, or be nostalgic with someone, or just go as being a Taoist means go with whatever the flavor is that's happening. Align yourself with what is. So if sadness comes along, what's the most beautiful way this sadness can be expressed and experienced today? Through poetry, through nostalgia with my sister, through looking at old paint photographs, through writing a blog about tenderness and how I'm feeling it so deeply and it's okay, or whatever it is. It's just allow that to have its beautiful, what is the most beautiful healthy expression of that, rather than how can I change it into something else.
This one's really hitting home as well, because I personally have times in my life where I've tried to apply that, and I'll say, okay, sadness, you can sit here with me and just be, and that goes fine for a day or 2 days, and then it's a week and I don't want to do anything. And I don't want to do my work. And then suddenly my sadness is not fine. And it starts to become crippling. And then I'm willing myself and gripping on and trying to steer myself back into work and losing my mindset. So what would you say to people in that position?
Okay, so when that happens and you actually have to partly get on with your life, that sadness in you, if you imagine it a little bit like that Disney movie Inside Out, where she has a little blue sadness and her red anger and everything, I do believe they're like little beings that live in us. So that sad character who does feel like she's given up on life, and she's probably from when you were a little girl, stopped you from exhausting yourself trying to please everybody every 5 minutes and be the perfect girl in pigtails to satisfy everyone's need for you to be in that little box. So that sadness was an important part for you when you were young. It kept you real, And so if it lasts too long, you have a little dialogue with the sadness. Call it forward, put your hand on your chest, just rub yourself, go all right in there. And then you just ask it, now look, we've been sitting inside now for 4 days. I want to go to Ben's house on Saturday. Everyone's going, and I know you're feeling a little bit introverted. So I don't want to miss this. How could it be nicer for you if we go? What could we do that would make it gentler for you? Because I don't want to miss it. And then they will often say back, you hear in your head something about, if it's too much, can we leave early? Yes. And if they know that their needs are being met, they don't need to be pulling you away from it as you're walking down the street, dragging you in the opposite direction, because it's consensual now. So if you're in a space but you feel it's time to move into a different space, do it with an inner dialoguing that makes it consensual with the one in you who resists. And ask them, how could we do this, even if it's drip feeding it step by step? What is the route to this other place that feels safe for you inside? And make it consensual, because a lot of people break through and expose. I don't believe in breaking through, because it's not consensual with the inner parts of us, which are very fragile and delicate and beautiful and deserve the love and care that we often didn't get as children as often as we needed. So to treat ourselves with loving, when we start breaking through ourselves, we're treating ourselves with the same neglect and insensitivity that the teachers and parents treated us with. So be gentle, be consensual with those parts of yourself that resist, and see if you can just negotiate gently with them. What would be the nice, comfortable way to do this?
Wow, that tenderness is...
I can feel it right now in the room.
Yeah.
She just wants you to hear. Just stop rushing around. All this stuff happens in the yin, which means we pause, we go still, we listen, we feel. That's the yin, curiosity. It's not about thinking it through and working out, why do I feel sad? And can I do today? It's not an intellectual solving analysis. It's a stilling, listening emptiness. Just feel that sadness and just say hi. It will immediately start telling you what it needs in the stillness, just by pausing, listening, and being curious.
Yeah, I love that. And just for those, again, listening who don't know about yin and yang and those energies, can you just briefly...
Yeah, everyone's seen the yin-yang sign, the Chinese sign, and it's basically they break down our reality into a yang part and a yin. Everyone has a yang, which is that your will, you're doing things, you're taking decisions, taking actions, exerting your will, making things how you want it, taking action. That's your yang will. Your yin is the part of you that is impacted by the world, that is penetrated by the world, that a great idea pops into your head. When you dance, you're being moved by the beat. You're not kind of doing the moving, the beat's moving you. When you smile or laugh, it erupts in you. It's more accurate to say, I am smiled, I am laughed, because you kind of don't do it on purpose. So the yin is the one that listens, that's curious, that asks questions, and then waits for the answer to come. So it's receptive, it's the receptive part. And it's not really used so much in our culture, but it's where all the magic of life is. We're all very, very used to using our yang in school. Get from here to there, use your will, learn the thing, pass the test, buy the thing, get the thing, take your will and get it how you want it. That's, making choices and doing things in the world deliberately. But we don't often sit still and let it happen to us. There's many, many areas we don't trust that. And yet, when I write a song, any musician or poet will tell you, when you write a piece of music, you listen for it. You don't make it up with your thinky mind. You go still and you hear, la da da, and you go, oh, that sounds good. You're a glorified secretary for it coming into your head. You feel like you're a conduit or a channel without being too grandiose. And also the same with parenting. It's when you're in your listening, when you're the space around that child, that you will do the greatest parenting. You're so tuned into them that their signals of what they need to be the best tomato plant they can be, you will just be the environment for them to thrive. That's yin. You're the environment where it's thriving. The yang parent is like, get your shoes on, get a haircut, be an accountant. You're penetrating, you're telling the child what to do. And the same as we were saying before with lovemaking. You're so tuned in, you're so in your yin. If you're really listening to that person, really inhaling them, really seeing every movement, every ripple, sensing them, and all your sensitivity is so open, so curious, so listening in your devotion, you'll of course have the most beautiful lovemaking of your life. It's all in the yin, listening, curious, allowing yourself to be moved, allowing yourself to be impacted.
Thank you so much for that. Just in closing up, I would love for you to talk about what your hopes are for this film, how we can support it as listeners, and where things are going for you from here.
Well, for the film, just, I guess, come and see it in the cinema on becomingnobody.com. There's the theatres it's on and the new ones it comes out in. Tell people, bring people. It's a lovely thing to experience as a group. And if that's not going to happen for you, write to Netflix and say, when's it coming? That would help us. And I guess after this, the Adam and Eve project, I hope will be a film of some, a bit like the Ramdas film, but different. And I'm just, looking for more places to come and talk and come and play and come and, I'm hoping to come back to America and do some workshops and some mentoring. So I'm looking for different places to come and run those events.
How can people get in contact with you on maybe your website and Instagram?
Yeah, jamiecatto.com, myname.com, and myname@mac.com is an email. And I'm very easy to find. I'm very lonely.
Wonderful. Jamie, thank you so much for your time today and all
Wonderful.
of your wisdom.
Wonderful to have me. Thanks.
Thank you.